So this morning we heard about the nature of the cybersecurity threat. And this panel, the goal of it is to understand how quantum Dice's technology can potentially help address this threat. We have three exceptional panelists here covering different areas of the system integrator market. And we would like to talk to them a little bit more about how our technology can work with theirs to help secure everyone. But before we start, I just want to outline a few things. Now, we would like this panel to be accessible to as many people as possible. So if you can, avoid technical terms. And if there's an acronym, just start by saying what it is before going into it. Because what this panel is going to be covering is our disk QRNG. I'm kidding. So what disk is basically a protocol that we have developed here at Quantum Dice. And the acronym stands for a source device independent self-certification. Now, this is an approach to quantum random number generation that allows us to continuously monitor and verify the quality of the randomness that's coming out of our system, and therefore the quality of the keys that can be created from it. And this allows for a real-time monitoring of that quality as the device operates. And so this is the context for what we're going to be talking about today. But first, I would like to ask each one of the panelists to introduce themselves, their company, and their position within it. Starting from you, Richard.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ramy, for inviting me to take part in the panel. Richard Searle. I'm the Chief AI Officer for a company called Fortanix. We're based in Santa Clara in California. We are pioneers in a technology called confidential computing, and we use that to develop a technology called Data Security Manager, which is a software-based hardware security module, or HSM. And that currently provides post-quantum cryptography support into our customers. They are global customers. We operate around the world through both on-premises and SaaS deployments with Fortune 500 type organizations. And we're delighted to be partnered with Quantum Dice and integrating their quantum random number generator with the disk protocol features. And we'll be demonstrating that as a case study this afternoon.
Hi, I'm Peter Davies. I'm Director of Security Concepts for Thales, which is a global company. I think one of our three pillars is security, and it has been my life for the last 42 years doing this kind of stuff, various HSMs and things. So I've learnt along the way that random numbers are really quite important to being able to do that. We offer those into pretty much every sector. We offer it into space. We put it on the bottom of the ocean. We put it in various places where it can't afford to fail. We basically power the financial systems around the world. We power a lot of the telecom systems around the world, and we care a lot about those sorts of things. So essentially, from the beginning of my activities, we've been interested in how, not only how you use random numbers and what we do in relation to do that, and I like to say we've always used random numbers, hardware random number generators with quantum effects, but also how you're able to differentiate and what you need to do, most particularly how we can establish those in a way that customers can be confident in. So we are very interested in the work that Quantum Dice have been doing because of that. So I don't believe that most of my customers are mathematically astute enough to necessarily be prepared to trust it.
Okay, Peter. And finally, Haydn.
Hi, everybody. I'm Haydn Povey. I'm founder and CEO of a company called SCI Semiconductors. We're looking to bring a new technology called Cherry to market, and in partnership with Quantum Dice around the entropy source for that. Cherry, or Capability Hardware Enhanced RISC Instructions, is a new architectural set of instructions built either around RISC-V or around the ARM ISA. So it's right down into the DNA of the computer architecture. The nice thing about this Cherry architecture is it immediately eviscerates the 70% of critical vulnerabilities caused by memory safety issues. So these are things like buffer overflows, dangling pointers, use after free. very deep technical terms from computer science degrees. Through the implementation of Cherry, alongside quantum entropy, we believe that we can build better communication systems, better embedded systems, really across a very wide array of applications, from IoT and edge all the way up to cloud, and we've seen that in partnership with ARM and other partners. The open source commons that we own as part of this and have built upon, we co-own with Google and with Microsoft. So really working with major companies and both the US and UK government, so the guys in Cheltenham especially. Okay.
Thank you so much, Haydn. All right, so let's start by delving a little bit into the tech. So, Peter, as you mentioned, you have been working for a long part of your career with randomness. What I'd like to understand a bit more is what interested you about quantum lattice technology, and specifically, what do you find interesting in disk?
So, over the years, it's been, you've always had this dichotomy. So you've been able to get through your FIPSs, so your Federal Information Processing Standards and things that people rely on there, pseudo-random number generators, because you can prove how they work, you can do a lot of things there, and you can do failure modes around those sorts of things. On the other hand, we all know that the weakness of those is if you knew what the starting point was, you can basically guess your keys. And right from early on in my career, in fact, one of the earliest things on SSL before it was TLS, there was a big argument about weaknesses because it was using, I think, 56-bit algorithms at the time. But the real weakness is the fact that everything took it from the clock on the PC. So you could basically break every session in real time. So for that, you need hardware randomness. But the problem with that is proving that in every instance it's working properly in relation to this. So if you look at the ways that you go about doing that theoretically normally, it involves vast pools of data that you can't do that in real time to work out what you're doing around those sorts. So what do we like about the prospect of the things that were coming out of quantum dice? It was that ability to at least potentially be able to conclude that theoretically this was producing random numbers or randomness, enough entropy from something that we could reason about. It was doing that at a reasonable pace, and it was doing it using something that we could prove that it was doing that. I said, that's one thing to convince me. It's another thing to actually convince my customers. My customers have a very tried and tested way that they do this. They grab hold of, if they care about it, every random noise source they can find, XOR them together to make sure that we do things. But it seems to me that over time, this looks like a solution that has the potential to get better confidence and be able to put a single thing into basically getting your hardware random numbers and being able to prove them in such a way that people will have confidence in them. And it's similar to the questions that were being asked on the first panel. We know that over the next 20 years, somebody might come out with an implementation thing, somebody might come out. So random numbers are just too important for you to always go for one thing. There's always something that you've overlooked that's outside of your model and that kind of stuff. So will it be the only solution in the world? No, but does it have the potential to be a major contributor and be able to actually do the right things? Yes, I think it probably does. And it's that combination of the quantum effects and being able to actually take that and use a method of reasoning about what that would actually mean. And for me, that's potentially a really big breakthrough. It allows, which I think is also important, much higher bandwidth of entropy coming out of your hardware random sources. So normally these are quite slow, and you feed them into software random number generators in order to try and get. This actually has a much better probability of being able to do something that we can actually use at scale for some of the really big areas that we would need those sorts of things. So for me, that's why I think it would be really good. That's why I think it's potentially something quite unique.
Thank you so much. So, Haydn, you talked about the cherry architecture. So we have been working together on integrating the QRNG into your Iceni chip. Could you tell us a little bit about your thought process behind that? As somebody who is developing already something so groundbreaking, why did you feel that the QRNG could bring benefit to Iceni? In what way then?
I think it's really important to think about the use cases. And the reality is the modern world, talking earlier on the panel around how information can be recorded and broken later on. The challenges are that we know that most of our systems are not fit for purpose today, by a long way. If we look at something like smart grid, we have limitations on how smart we can make the power grid because it just cannot be secured properly. We cannot have a full fleet of EVs because we can't get the power grid functioning properly. We can't get the power from where it's generated to where it needs to be consumed. And these are fundamental problems which affect everybody. So what we need to do is develop the technology which is fit for purpose, which does enable us to move forward with things like digitizing the power grid. And this comes back to Department of Energy and Net Zero, to Ofgem, to PowerGen, to Network Power, all the way down to the smart meters which do need to go in people's homes. And that requires us to have a new concept of how we do communications. It needs to be flexible, it needs to be fast, it needs to be something which is scalable from nuclear power stations to smart meters into people's homes, how they connect to the white goods. All of that requires better communications, and all of that requires better entropy, because what we've got right now is frankly broken. None of us realize quite how badly it is broken, but it is massively broken. So the only way that we can fix these things is basically by drawing a line, by saying that computer architecture as it's been defined up till now is not fit for purpose. The cherry technology actually came out of the crash program out of DARPA about 15 years ago, which came from the thought that computer architecture just sucks. It's broken badly. So how do we fix this? How do we move that forward? Thankfully, saner minds persevered, and we've come to extensions for ARM and for RISC-V. But it's only through, this integration of better computer architecture, better entropy, the ability to also patch in post-quantum cryptography so that we have a 20, 30, 40-year life cycle for the operational technology that we're going to be building. It's only by building platforms based on this new technology that we're actually going to be able to revolutionize or unleash the power that we have in our operational technology. So this isn't next generation military. This isn't next generation IT. This is keeping the lights switched on. And it really is as deep as that. But it requires better entropy because we have more communication, and that is not going to end. It's just going to continue to grow and dominate.
We've heard a lot about how QRNGs can help. Now, I think from a practical point of view, how does this integration work?
Yeah, well, I'll try not to get too technical. So the QRNG is very important. So let's just take a step back and understand why we need an information entropic source within the cryptographic environment. So essentially what we're trying to do is to put randomness, as Peter mentioned, into the cryptographic keys so that they can't then be guessed or brute forced. And that's going to be particularly important in the quantum era, where quantum computers, the parallelization that they offer, could potentially support the breaking of our existing, particularly public key cryptography. And these are based on long-established formal methods. So today, as Peter mentioned, all of the cryptographic solutions on the market typically have what's called entropy source validation, and that's typically based on a source of thermal noise related to the processor architecture of the device that's hosting the cryptography. But actually that poses its own risks because it's not necessarily fully random. All of the chips are manufactured in the same factories to the same designs, running the similar software. So quantum entropy offers the ability to inject pure randomness, and that can be then used to seed the deterministic random bit generators that are used to actually produce the cryptographic keys that we use for our cryptography, whether that be to encrypt data or to effectively establish cryptographic handshakes within public key infrastructure. So how is that achieved? The way that we are achieving it within Fortanix is we're consuming entropy from quantum dice devices via an API, and that is then blended with our existing entropy source. So effectively what we're doing is we are ensuring the complete randomness of the entropy that is being ingested by the random bit generator that is then seeding the cryptography, whether that be post-quantum cryptography or the legacy algorithms we're using today. The disk protocol that you mentioned is extremely important, and one of the key reasons that we've chosen to partner with Quantum Dice, because what we're able to do within our particular product architecture is to introduce custom attributes onto the cryptographic keys where we can actually present the disk protocol attributes, and for the lifetime of the key that will record how it was actually seeded. And that effectively provides confidence to our customers that their keys have been produced with a source of randomness that is sufficiently well characterized to assure the long-term security of that key. And some of those keys might be, as Peter mentioned, deployed on things like satellites, undersea systems. And in fact, our introduction to quantum entropy was through a munitions program that we were involved with about 2 years ago. The other important aspect of our system is that by ingesting that entropy from the quantum dice devices with the disk protocol attributes, we can then provide that entropy as a throughput from our system from a secured source, which is effectively what the hardware security module operates as, to downstream systems. And this is very important within the distributed infrastructures, network infrastructures that are going to need to consume entropy but don't necessarily have the ability to generate that locally. And if anybody cares to look up the CVEs related to this, entropy starvation within network devices is a proven source of compromise to Cisco devices in recent years, and the availability to present entropy from the HSM to client systems is very important to secure the wider perimeter beyond the actual seeding of cryptography.
Thank you so much. So, because we're sitting between people and lunch, so I'm going to ask you to give a very quick note on, talk a little bit about the technical side of things. So let's talk a little bit about the more business side of the story, because as Peter mentioned, it's one thing for engineers to like a technology, it's another thing for customers to like it as well. So Haydn, could you tell us a little bit more about where do you see the business value within IoT space? Because that is a space where people don't necessarily think about security immediately.
I would agree. I mean, in IoT and in OT, as we've seen recently, people are not paying enough attention to cyber, and a lot of that comes back to the fact that it's traditionally seen as a cost rather than an advantage to the organization. Perhaps the things which unfortunately have hit JLR recently will sharpen the minds of some board members, but I wouldn't put it past people to still have their head stuck in the sand. Fundamentally, we have to make cyber, and we have to make stronger communications a prerequisite, whether this is through the CRA, the Crypto Resilience Act out of Europe, whether this is through standards like the CISA and the NSA have driven in the US, 62443-4. These things have to become prerequisite for the systems which are being built. That does require a village to raise the children. It does require government leadership, but it also requires that these things are cost effective. Cyber is seen as an additional cost, a penalty, a punishment. And we have to change that. We have to say, no, it's okay, there may be a bit more cost, but it shouldn't be a major additional cost. You know, for example, what we're doing with Iceni and with disk, these things are going to be, of course, a little bit more expensive. They have to be. They're new technology. You have to pay for the R&D. But it's not a 2x. It's not a 10x. It has to be lower down. We have to understand how people consume technology and how they drive it through. I was talking to the CISO of one of the big 5 electricity or electric companies, doing all the metering, switchgear, all of those sort of things. From their perspective, memory safety is 50% of their life. And that means rolling trucks. That means getting people out to fix product in factories. And that's incredibly expensive. So if we can fix that, if we can fix the entropy, if we can make our communication systems a lot better, we actually reduce their total cost of ownership substantially. And this is where we have to impact the commercial imperative. How do we reduce cost of ownership of systems? Because tech, the one-time cost of purchasing the tech, that's not where real cost is. It's how long do I have to look up after it? How expensive is it going to be? And how do I manage that? So cyber in all of its forms, we have to change that balance. We have to change that equation. We have to focus on long life cycles, better technology, better ability to impact that remotely, better protection in totality. And it's only through that, through the combination of disk, of things like Cherry, of post-quantum cryptography in general, that we're actually going to change that. Build systems which actually last, not for 5 years, not for 10 years, but for 30 years, 40 years or longer. And that's hard.
Thank you, Haydn. And so, Richard, tell us a little bit about how you see the business impact then in things like AI and data security. But
Yeah.
about Fortanix.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So, our focus at Fortanix has been the use of cryptography and the implementation of post-quantum cryptography within our system. But as some of you may have seen, if you've looked at our company website, we've been with NVIDIA at GTC in Washington this week talking about AI. My current position there is as the Chief AI Officer. There's a very important role for high quality entropy in the AI domain moving forward, particularly as AI proliferates. And one of the things that has been talked about in the AI domain is the problem of algorithms and models consuming data and then consuming their own outputs as inputs and effectively leading to things like model collapse. And actually the ability to refresh models through randomization, and I know that you've done a lot of work in Monte Carlo simulation, for example, in the finance industry, is an important use case for entropy. And again, being able to consume that from a trusted endpoint so that you don't corrupt your models with pseudo randomness that can then be corrupted by a potential adversary is very important. So I'm doing some work in the national security domain at the moment where the use of entropy for refresh of AI systems is going to be particularly important, and that's especially important where we're moving into more autonomous systems. And again, the ability to do that locally, potentially to distribute entropy to endpoints that are within a mesh network is very important. So, the reason that we've introduced quantum random number generation within our HSMs is because we believe in having, the optimal security throughout the stack. And as a foundational level, a lot of people are focused within post-quantum cryptography on the algorithms, but actually, those foundational matters are something that we're also paying strong attention to, and we already have customers that are now interested in the QRNG HSM integration so that they have a fully quantum safe implementation of their cryptography moving forward.
Thank you very much, Richard. And now, final question before we move on to a Q&A, maybe the most important question. So why do we think that this is something that people need to care about now? Peter, what is your view on that? What is your view on the current timing of this technology?
So I think actually to follow on from what my two colleagues here have been saying, I'm actually the most positive person about security. In the sense that my entire life has been spent selling security to people, and since the 1990s, the principal reason why my customers have bought security has got nothing to do with compliance. It's always had to do with benefit. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is I can't deliver software. I can't do minimum viable products and onward develop. I can't do the things that the modern world, I can't discover that actually this thing is more valuable for something over here than it was for there and deploy it. So all these aspects that take away from the what a colleague used to call forklift updates and that allow us to actually have a tempo in putting all of those things in, that is where we are. We're composing systems all the time. We are not designing systems that stay that way forever. And random numbers and entropy sources are absolutely the root of being able to do that. As soon as I haven't got trustworthy entropy in my systems, then I don't have the ability to do any of that. And we're having to do this at a scale we never had to do it at before. We're having to overlay, it's almost like one-time codes that you used to get. We're having to overlay those over data models to make sure those data models can't be corrupted. We're putting that at the low level into chips, where there isn't actually enough in silicon on chips anymore to be able to, switch properly. So all of this requires entropy that can be trusted in a way that you have always had to, but at a scale that we've never had to do those things. So I guess my position there is, why does this matter now? It matters now because I have far more of this stuff to do. I have such consequences for the entire world and the entire set of things that people are doing from every perspective if I can't get this stuff right. So anything that I get that allows me to do that. And the other thing I think is, you talked about the fact that we put hardware random numbers into pseudo random number generators. That tops out as a particular point. There's a point at which I can't do that anymore. And that I think is a really significant thing. Somewhere I'm going to actually have to trust the hardware to do this. So those sorts of things are the reasons why I think this is a technology whose time is coming, if not come. And certainly I believe that everything you want to do going forward is going to be reliant on this. So I don't think it sorts cyber. I just think if you don't do this, you definitely can't do cyber.
Thank you very much, Peter. I would say I would agree, but people would say I'm biased. So at this point...
Not in entropy, so you're not allowed to talk about bias.
Absolutely. So first, I would like to thank our panelists. So please give a round of applause for this incredible panel.